So welcome everybody. My name is Nikki Lawrence and I'm a member of the TFN's lecture committee team and I'll be hosting the meeting today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land. The Toronto field naturalists acknowledge that this land through which we walk has for thousands of years been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississauga of the Credit River. Today it is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be on this land. Thanks so much to the whole lecture team for organizing today's event. Today we'll be learning about Toronto's urban infrastructure and why it's an important part of environmental awareness from Mariko Uda. But I'd like to sort of share some Zoom tips first. Be aware we're recording this event and the recording will be available to members only, which is another good reason to get your membership in. The lecture itself is pre-recorded, and of course, Mariko has joined us live as well, so we can have a Q&A session afterwards. We'll be muting everybody during the lecture. It's a good habit just to keep yourself muted unless you're about to ask a question during the question and discussion. We also turn off our videos. You can turn off your videos, especially if you plan to move around. It reduces distractions for everybody else. After the presentation, please stay to thank our speaker and join in the discussion. We all crave that lively back and forth. Our speakers especially like to know we've been paying attention, that we're interested. I also have a few very important announcements to share, so do stick around. To ask questions, you have a few ways to get noticed, and Ellen and I will be monitoring all the options. If you have your video on, and if we can see your name, then you just raise your hand and wave it around until somebody says something. There's also a raise hand feature that you can find by clicking on participants. You can also type your question into the chat feature. Mariko is an ecologically minded Torontonian with a background in biology, chemistry, and architecture, and also has a Ph.D. in civil engineering. She will be discussing urban infrastructure awareness and why she thinks it's an important part of environmental awareness. Her debut book, Where Does It All Come From? Where Does It All Go? Toronto's Water, Energy, and Waste System, combines her love of drawing, teaching, and exploring connections. In a big city like Toronto, it's easy to live disconnected from the environment and infrastructure that supports us each day. Once we know where things come from and where things go, we can begin to name them and get connected with our environment. Mariko will be asking for your comments a few times during this lecture. Please type your responses in chat and I'll try to collate them all together for question period. So welcome, Mariko.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to come talk to your organization, Toronto Field Naturalists. And I'm also delighted that Lost Rivers is here, as Lost Rivers has long been a source of inspiration and friendship for me, and we've collaborated a few times. I'll just give you a quick background on my geographical background. I was born in the Don River watershed, and I grew up in the Bronte Creek watershed, and then the Credit River watershed, and now I'm back living in the Don River watershed. As a kid, I loved drawing, and around grade 8 or 9, I really got exposed to environmental issues. In grade 9, I read Silent Spring, and from then on, whenever I had a project in high school, I picked an environmental topic. So things like thermal inversions, Amazon rainforest, and in English class, I read Henry David Thoreau. And so by the time I was going to university, I was pretty entrenched in environmental issues. And so I studied biology and chemistry, civil engineering, architecture. And today I'm here to talk to you about my book, which is called Where Does It All Come From? Where Does It All Go? Toronto's Water, Energy, and Waste Systems. And the map continues on the back cover. This book covers our water system, stormwater, sewage system, electricity, natural gas, and garbage. And as you can see, it kind of looks like a kid's book. And it's actually written in a very simple and clear way. So it is a kid's book, but it's also for adults. So I call it an all ages book. A lot of people say, oh, you know, we need to educate the young people and then they're going to grow up and save the world. But actually, we don't have time to wait for them to grow up. So we really need to educate not just kids, but their parents and adults in general. The book is also written in a simple and clear way that's accessible to newcomers. Some newcomers may not have English as a first language. So this is very accessible to them as well. And I hope it will encourage them to get more involved. I feel like for a newcomer to come to Toronto, say, it's like coming into someone else's kitchen and you kind of don't know how things work. And so you kind of hesitate. But if you are told, oh, this is how this kitchen works, you know, use the fridge in this way and da 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 da, then I feel that they would feel more at home and be less hesitant to participate. And the book is also for people who are maybe intimidated by technical things. The topics are technical, but it's all explained in a very easy way. So that's my book. I think the originating factors for my book were three things. One is my civil engineering studies, which kind of helped me understand these systems. And second is my environmental concern. That was a big motivation for me to be writing this book. And third is mindfulness meditation, which I've practiced for a long time, which encourages us to look at everything as being interconnected. So I think those three things kind of combined in my mind and were the seed for this book. As well as that I was astounded that most of us don't know these basic things. So that was a big driving factor. So I'm just going to put my slides up, if you can wait for a moment. The first slide is just the cover of my book. And next, I would like to do a quick quiz to start off. So I'd like to just everyone take a minute or so to write down or draw out where their water and energy come from and where their sewage, stormwater, and garbage goes. So if you could do that to the best of your ability, I'll give you a moment to do so. And I would like you to be as specific geographically as you can. So rather than just garbage dump, like where is this garbage dump? So I'll give you a moment to do that. And if it's possible to put it in the chat, I'd like you to put down whether you know the answers to all 6 of these, in which case you could put a 6. And if you don't know any of them, you could put a 0. Just to give me a sense of how much you know. And if you don't know the answers, don't feel bad about it, because in my experience, talking to people, most people don't know most of these things. And if you know 6 out of 6, well, you're very knowledgeable. Okay, thanks very much for letting me know where you're at. The next question I want to ask is, okay, so if you were low on this scale, I'd like you to think of why. What are the contributing factors to why you don't know this knowledge? And if if you're a 6 out of 6, you can ponder why maybe other people don't know some of the things that you know. And I just want to give you a chance to think about it and put it in the chat, some of the reasons why you think this is the way it is. And then afterwards, I'm going to share some of the reasons I've come up with. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to share now the 5 reasons I thought of. First is that it's hidden. A lot of our infrastructure is hidden, so it's really hard to see where it all comes from and where it all goes. As well, the second reason is that our infrastructure is pretty reliable most of the time, so we don't really need to know where it comes from or where it goes. We don't really need to know how it all works. We just use it. And so that's the second reason. And then the third reason I came up with is that a lot of people might be new to the city, and so they might not know, and that's understandable. But then I've talked to people that have lived here all their lives, and they don't necessarily know either. And so I think that's because we don't really learn this in schools, at least as far as I know. It might be taught in some places. And then the final reason I came up with is that I think there's a thought in our society that it doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter where. And I was repeating this to myself a few times yesterday, and I was thinking, oh, this is actually a sad thought that it does not matter where. But what I mean by this is like, we think, well, it doesn't really matter where our garbage is going. It's going to a dump somewhere, and it doesn't matter where. Or our water is coming from somewhere, and it doesn't really matter where. Our stormwater is going somewhere to some river, but it doesn't really matter which river. And I feel this is sad because it epitomizes the disconnection to our environment that we have accepted as normal. So my book is to kind of counter all of these things. What is hidden, I'm trying to reveal. And I've made it, as I said, easily accessible for newcomers. And it's also, the intention is for this to get into schools, hopefully. And in terms of it does not matter where, my book is all about it matters where is very important. And it's in the title of my book twice. So I want to share kind of the observation I made that became key to my book. And that is that when we're out in nature, we do feel a sense of connection. So we do have the capacity to feel connected to our environment. So if we're, say, lucky enough to be on a camping trip or at a cottage or at a park, and we're in a river and we wash our face with the river, we feel connected to the river. We feel that the water is sacred or magical. It's nature. We're immersed in it, and we feel wonderful, and we feel really connected to nature. So I observed that happens. But then, and then here you have someone, you know, by a campfire, also connected to the energy source, which is the fire from the logs. So again, this knowledge of where that energy is coming from and this connection to nature. But then something happens when we come back home. Sorry. Back home into our city home. We just kind of get disconnected. So here you have someone flushing the toilet. They really don't know where that's all going. And then you have someone throwing something in the garbage, and they're also kind of not really thinking about where that goes. And so there seems to be this disconnection that's happening here. And that water, that same water that we were, you know, bathing in and feeling really connected with, when we get home and turn on our taps, that water suddenly is not that same magical sacred water. It suddenly becomes H2O, and it becomes kind of lifeless, and it becomes a commodity, and that's sort of how we view it. So my observation was kind of looking at the contrast of those, you know, out when we're immersed in nature and when we're at home turning on our tap. And so I sense that there's this disconnect, this kind of wall that forms when we're back in our city homes. And so my motivation, my drive, the compelling idea that drove me to write this book was to blast this wall and like get rid of it, smash it to smithereens, and show that the water coming out of our tap is that same sacred, magical water from our lake or river that we were experiencing when we were out in it. And we're connected to it just as intimately as we are connected when we're out in nature. We just don't see it, but once we see it, and that's what this book is about, to show it, then we can reconnect with the water or nature or the land, and realize that we're just as connected to all these entities as we are when we're out in nature. So that's the main drive of my book, to break this wall. And I really feel that we really need to do it for the environment and for ourselves. For the environment, like, if we understand how we are part of the system and how we are interacting with the lake or river or the land, then we will see how we can change our habits or whatever, or our design, in order to take care of the lake that's at the other end of the pipe, or the river that's at the other end of the pipe, or the land that's accepting our waste, and so on. I think, like, as an environmentalist, like, we can also be quite disconnected. We could be trying to save some piece of land or wetland or something somewhere out there, and be really connected to that, and yet come home and not be connected to our own wetland or river that we're actually every day interacting with. And so the book's all about kind of revealing how we're connected, and then there's a tip sheet to that tells you like some of the things that you can do to take care of the lake or the river or the land. But I also want to say that this connection is good for us, good for our souls. I think it's good for us psychologically and spiritually to be connected. Because I've written this book and I've talked about it a lot of times, I'm pretty much memorized all my where does it all come from and where does it all goes. And so automatically on demand, I can kind of go into kind of a meditation and picture all the things that I'm connected to. So for instance, on Earth Day, I was like, oh, you know, thank you for this water. I know that it comes from deep in Lake Ontario and it comes through the treatment plant and it's all pumped towards me, and thank you. And when I flush the toilet, I can be aware that, okay, this is going down the sewers, it's going to the sewage treatment plant, and then the watery part's going back to Lake Ontario, and the solids are going to all kinds of places. And I feel like, oh, and I know which sewage treatment plant. So I know it's Ashbridges Bay treatment plant. So I'm connected to that, and I can say, thank you. And in terms of the stormwater, the rain that lands near my home, I know that that's going to Yellow Creek, which is a tributary of the Don River. So I know that the Don River is my river. And in terms of electricity, I know that it comes from the Ontario grid, which is, you know, nuclear, hydroelectric, wind, gas, solar. So all those plants are and all those plants are supporting me. And my natural gas is coming from fossils that are deep under Western Canada and near the Gulf of Mexico and Pennsylvania, Ohio, and they're coming to heat my home and keep me warm, and heat my water and keep me warm. And my garbage, I know, goes to a dump near London, Ontario. And so I picture all these tentacles coming out from me to all these entities, living and non-living, that support my everyday life. So when I realize this, I feel, first of all, a lot of appreciation for all that the earth does to allow me to live. And I also feel a sense of being included, a sense of interacting with the whole world, well, all these entities, and I feel a sense of connection and belonging and rootedness. I feel like I'm really a living being within a living world, interacting, not isolated. And I don't feel lost or alone. So I'm just going to read a bit from my book. I say, once we know where it all comes from and where it all goes, we are no longer lost and alone, but strongly grounded in our knowing of exactly how we are connected to our natural environment each day. So I've done a lot of philosophizing, and some of you probably want me to like get to the infrastructure. So I'm gonna show you a few pages from my book. So this is the table of contents. So as I mentioned, I cover water and energy and a bit of garbage. So today, since we don't have too much time, I can't cover everything, but I can show you water, sewage, and stormwater. So this is our water system. The water comes from these intake pipes in Lake Ontario. They come to the water treatment plant, and then it's pumped to our house, by pumping stations throughout the city. And then it goes to a reservoir or tank maybe, or straight to our taps. So yeah, when we're using water, we're also using energy because energy is needed for water treatment and water pumping. And the next slide shows a map of, this slide shows a map of Toronto and the 4 water treatment plants and the pumping stations. These are the circles are all the pumping stations. And the blue rectangles are underground reservoirs. I live close to the St. Clair, this one on St. Clair, this one here, which is under Sir Winston Churchill Park. It's a big rectangular park with no trees. And the reason there's no trees is because they don't want the tree roots to get into the concrete wall. And then we have a few above ground tanks. So on your walks, you can maybe incorporate some of these pieces of water infrastructure that provide us with drinking water. I went to a school to do a book talk, and afterwards the kids put up this sign by the water fountain. Enjoy this water from Lake Ontario. So this is something that can enliven the water and make it change our perception from it being, H2O, a commodity, to it's a living lake. Okay, next I'm going to cover sewage. So our sewage goes into a sanitary sewer, joining other sanitary sewers from other buildings, and then eventually making its way to the wastewater treatment plant. Here it's screened first, and then the solids are settled out, but you still have some solids in the water. So we add aerobic microorganisms, which eat the smaller particles. And then we have to settle out the aerobic microorganisms. So that's the secondary settling. The solids go to forest and tree nurseries, agricultural land, mines, landfill, or incineration, or are processed into fertilizer products or soil conditioner. And then the liquid part, the water, goes back to Lake Ontario. So something I like to point out is that the sewage treatment plant is really only designed to treat our pee and poop and toilet paper. So we should not send our hazardous materials down the pipe. We down the drain. We should also not put medicines down the drain. There's really, things are not magically treated. So yeah, chemicals should not be put down the drain. As well, we shouldn't put flushable wipes down the toilet. They're not actually flushable. Well, you can flush them, but they are not, the system does not want them because they cause clogging because they don't break down enough. Even tissue paper, you're not supposed to put down the drain, and cotton balls, Q-tips, and floss are also not to be put down the toilet. You're only supposed to put down the 3 Ps: pee, poop, and toilet paper. Fats, oils, and greases should also not go down the kitchen drain because they cause clogging of the sewer pipes. Okay. Next. Sorry. This is a sewer shed map. So using this map, you can figure out which of the 4 sewage treatment plants your poop is going to. So for me, it's Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant. So then I encourage people to find out which one, because then it becomes like, instead of, oh, I'm flushing this and it's going away somewhere vague, you now have the answer. Oh, my sewage is going to Ashbridges Bay treatment plant, for example. And then you can have like a relationship, and it's no longer vague, it's specific. And like, in order to have a relationship, you have to be able to know the name, and then that's the start of getting to know it and develop a relationship, right? So the kids at the school, they put this sign up by the toilet. When you flush, it goes to North Toronto Wastewater Treatment Plant. So that's the start of a relationship for them. Next, I'm going to cover stormwater. So this visual in my book, I really like because it shows that the water from our roofs and driveways and roads that go in the catch basin go to the river. Most people just see the left-hand side of this, and they don't see the river, and the catch basin really doesn't look like a river. So right there, you have that disconnect happening. Okay, and you also have foundation drains going into the storm sewer as well. Anyways, this visual basically explains where our rainwater goes. And so we don't want to dump things on our roads that we would dump in a river. So for instance, it's actually illegal to wash your car on the road and put the wash water down the catch basin because it goes to the river. What you're supposed to do is bring your car to a car wash, which treats the water before releasing it. Or what you can do is put the wash water in a bucket and then pour it down your toilet. And that's slightly better than putting it in the river. And also salts. We use a lot of salts during the winter for safety, but we don't want to oversalt because all that salt is going to the rivers, and the rivers aren't meant to be salty. So basically anything that you wouldn't put in the river, you don't want to put on the ground. So cigarette butts, dog poop, you want to pick up after that. And you don't want to feed birds like waterfowl because they'll poop more and that'll go to the river as well. Also, we want to reduce pesticide use. What else? Oh, and if you have a pool, you don't want to send the chlorinated water to the storm sewers or salt water to the storm sewers. So I won't get into it, but there's things you can do to safely dispose of your pool water. As well, in addition to the quality of the water we're sending to the river, we also want to be aware of the quantity. And because so much of our city is paved, the quantity of water going to our rivers during a rainstorm is like way too much, and it causes flooding and erosion. So that's why we want to have more permeable surfaces, trees, more trees, and we want things that soak or hold back the water. So by soaking, I mean soaking into the ground. So things like, well, green roofs, soaking it into the green roof, or soakaways, rain gardens, permeable pavements, rain barrels hold back water. So anything you can do to hold back or soak the water on your property, the better for the river. And last but not least, I want to talk, just mention combined sewer overflows. So in new parts of the city, we have a storm sewer and then we have a sanitary sewer for the sewage. But in some old parts of the city, we just have the sanitary sewer, which is this one. And we don't have storm sewers. So the rainwater that lands in those neighborhoods also goes into the sanitary sewer, which is then called a combined sewer. And that all goes to the sewage treatment plant. But when it rains a lot, you can imagine that these pipes overflow, and also it's also too much water for the sewage treatment plant. So what we have is we have overflow points that are usually to the rivers, so that these pipes have a way of releasing their overflow. And at the sewage treatment plant, we often skip this aerobic microorganism treatment stage and just go straight from here to here. This last step is chlorination before the water is released. So when it rains a lot, the combined sewers overflow to the rivers, which results in some untreated sewage going straight to the river. And we also have a bypass here where the sewage is not completely treated because we skipped this step. It is treated, but not completely treated. So I just wanted to share that with you. So all the things that you can do to hold back rainwater on your property or soak it into the ground also help reduce combined sewer overflows if you happen to be in an old area of Toronto that still has combined sewers. And I think that's it. As you can see in my book, I try to keep things very simple. And I don't go into too much detail. And the reason I did that was I don't want to overwhelm people. I don't want the book to be a book that people buy and then put on their shelf. I want it to be a book that people read. And so an adult could probably read this book in 15 minutes. But there's actually a lot to the book, and there's links at the bottom of a lot of the pages where you can go get more information. So I think of this book as kind of similar to your Toronto Field Naturalist or Lost River walks, in that when you're on a walk, you're given a lot of space to just observe, and you're not like overwhelmed with information. What I think you're encouraged to do on a walk is just to walk and observe, and then you might see one little plant that piques your curiosity, and then but that plant doesn't tell you everything about it. So it's up to you to kind of ask the next question and to do research and discover. So I feel like there's like layers of discovery. And on a walk, you find the first nugget of curiosity, and then you slowly over time dig further and further, and every walk you go on you learn something new. So my book is kind of meant to just provide those first nuggets of interesting information, and then I'm hoping that people will look at that information and think about it, and spend more time thinking rather than absorbing information given to them. So with this book, I'm thinking that this first basic information provides you with a framework, and then you can start asking more and more questions and learning more and more as you're able. So yeah, it's kind of more of a exploration, an invitation to explore rather than a textbook that tells you all the answers. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd just like to conclude with the major point that I would like to get across, and that is that we are just as connected to nature in the city as we are when we're out and immersed in it. We just don't see it. But once we do, it can transform our relationship with the environment that supports us every day. And that relationship will be good for the environment, and it will also be good for us. And I just want to say to the thought that pervades our society that it does not matter where, I want to say to that it does matter where matters, where matters. And that's what my book is about. If you'd like more information about my book and my work, you can go to www.ecomariko.com. So that's all I have to say today. Thank you so much for your attention on this Sunday afternoon. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak. And I wish you all the best in your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariko. Thank you so much. We're going to have a bit of a question and answer, but I'm pulling rank because I'm doing the hosting. And I also got a chat line asking about the combined sewer systems. This is your nugget that stuck with me. I didn't realize, I went and looked it up, how huge the area feeding combined sewers are. I mean, it's up to St. Clair, it's across the Humber River, it's over to parts of Scarborough. It's a huge area. And I'm wondering whether they're looking at any way of mitigating that, because I also read that between April and October, they may have multiple overflow events a day. And this is probably wrecking our entire waterfront. Are they doing anything to change this, or?
So yes, the combined sewer area is quite big, and there are maps online that you can find that show where the combined sewer area is. Now, they have been working to partially separate. So what that means is in some areas where they just have combined sewers, they've gone in and added a storm sewer to take at least the water on the road. But those sewers don't take the water from your roofs or your foundation drains. So that's why, you know, there's mandatory downspout disconnection where your roof water, instead of going into these either the storm sewer or the combined sewer, they want you to put the rainwater onto your property. So that kind of disconnects the rainwater from your roof. And then the foundation drains might still be going into the combined sewer, but they have at least been able to take the road water and put that into a separate sewer. So in areas of the combined sewer area where they've done that, they call it partially separated. So that's one step that they've done. So a lot of that combined sewer area is now partially separated. So that's one big thing they've done. In terms of the overflow, I believe at Ashbridge's Bay Treatment Plant, that overflow, that bypass that I was talking about, where there's too much water coming to the sewage treatment plant, so they have to bypass. That might happen like on average, like 1 or 2 times a month when it rains a lot. So I don't think it's every day or every week, but it's maybe around like once or twice a month. And then in terms of the water overflowing from the sewer pipe and going to the rivers, I'm not sure exactly how many times that happens. I just know the figure, the number for the sewage treatment plants. And actually you can go and find that, like the Ashbridge's Bay Treatment Plant report, and like it'll show you how many times they've had sewage treatment bypasses at the plant.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Because I am.
There was a question. There was a question, Nikki, about chlorine going into the lake, and how do we stop that, or what is there anything that can be done about chlorine that does go into the lake?
Yeah, so they add chlorine as the very last step before they release the water from the sewage treatment plant. And the reason they do that is to kind of deal with the E. coli that might still be in that water. So I'm not sure how we can stop that at home. I guess the reason why we add it is because, well, they're concerned about the bacteria levels in the water. So partly it might be because, some of the time the water is bypassing and not getting full treatment, right? So, I mean, we can help the situation, I guess, by reducing the amount of stormwater getting into the sewage treatment plant. So if we can work on that, that would help. And, maybe they could increase the capacity at the sewage treatment plant. But yeah, I guess I guess the only thing we can do is maybe try and reduce reduce the amount that we're sending to the sewage treatment plant, and then maybe that will reduce the need to add the chlorine so much. But yeah, good question.
Actually, there's another question here that talks about development, especially downtown development, and how it affects the water sewage challenge. Are we facing greater challenges because of the development? And
So on the water side, what's really interesting is that in the past approximate decade, even though the population of Toronto has gone up, the total water use of Toronto has gone down. And I was looking at that and I was going, how can that be possible? Because there's more of us, so there must be more water use. But what's happened is there's been building we have to put in efficient fixtures, efficient toilets, and so on. So that's made a big difference. But also, Toronto has less manufacturing. So that economic change has caused reduction in water. Because if you imagine, if one big manufacturing plant leaves, then that's like a lot of reduction in water use, right? So there might have been one other reason.
Mariko, the third reason is also economic, which is that water rates have gone up, and so it's a price signal, and it's a classic example to show that I mean, a price signal, when you listen to it, it's a nudge. It nudges you on your shoulder and it says, hey, you're using water. And if you do that millions and millions of times to millions and millions of people, on average, people go, oh, okay, I'm going to use less. Price signals work. Leaving things free is a problem. And so our water rates have been just a classic example that if you leave these things as free, then we misuse them. So but you're right. The loss of manufacturing has also been,
Right.
another economic downward pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
But so it was kind of reducing the water use, but now it's kind of leveled off because we've done our efficiency measures, and the manufacturing is less. But we still have to keep doing our water conservation and stuff, because people, the population is still increasing, and from now on it doesn't guarantee that will go down. And so and we don't want we're doing a lot of more development, so if we can keep conserving, then that will save us from having to build more infrastructure to provide more water. So that's a little bit of information on the water side. On the sewage side, yeah, you're probably wondering about new buildings going up in old neighborhoods, and then now you're going to have more sewage, right? So Well, I guess there is a connection between water and sewage because the more water we use, the more sewage we create. So by conserving water, we're also sending less water away from us as well. So that's one thing. So what was the question again? It was, oh, development and sewage. Yeah, so yeah, with more development, you do have more sewage, and it is, yeah, it is a concern, I guess, because we're not, everyone has sewage that they create, and we can't really reduce it too much except to conserve water.
Can I just
Yeah.
add something to that too, though, which is that part of it is, again, the question of where the people live.
Mhm.
Do you want people to live spread right across southern Ontario or into northern Ontario evenly and have lots and lots of very distributed sewage? Or is there value in dense cities? And a lot of planners and a lot of thinkers have said, for many, many reasons, and sewage is just sort of a good example. Yes, there is a lot of value in living in a dense city because you get efficiencies
Mhm.
in the way that you manage sewage. Every pipe is shorter, the distances are shorter, and you can put very high class, that is, tertiary treatments when you have a lot of sewage to treat. So if the alternative is that you have great suburbs, which or even sort of estate housing where everybody is on a septic tank, that's not a better solution, right? So it sort of brings you, again, the where question. It makes you think about alternatives.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we don't have tertiary treatment in our sewage treatment plant.
right, yeah.
We have primary, which is the settling part, and then the secondary is the aerobic microorganisms. Tertiary treatment is where you try to reduce the nitrogen and phosphorus content, and well, we do actually add something to try to reduce the phosphorus content, but the nitrogen maybe not so much. But yeah, I'm also I really like the idea of composting toilets because that really closes the cycle where the nutrients go back to the soil, kind of on site. Because the whole thing is that our pee and poop have a lot of nutrients in them, and we send them to the sewage treatment plant, and then that's settled. And some of it goes to fertilizer products and so on, or to nurseries and agriculture. But some of it is incinerated or put in landfill. So we lose all those nutrients. And then we spend money and resources making nitrogen fertilizer. So it would be good if we can close that cycle more and more.
Mariko, I
Some
see.
questions in chat about the demand. Ray points out that he'd been told the highest demand on the city's electrical bill is supplying water. And somebody else also asked about talking about electricity and gas with their rising rates in the city.
Okay. In terms of electricity use, 1/3 of the electricity bill for the government of Toronto, so the city government, is for water treatment, water pumping, and sewage treatment. And in terms of the breakdown between those three, it's kind of almost equal. So
Of that, 1/3 of the city's electricity bill, 1/3 is for water treatment, 1/3 is for water pumping, and 1/3 is for sewage treatment. So it's quite a bit of electricity for the city of Toronto. In terms of rates, electricity and natural gas. You know, I rent and I really don't have a breakdown on my own electricity and natural gas rates, so I don't really pay much attention. So I'm sorry, I think I'll skip that question, but maybe I'll look into it and I can get back to you.
Do you have any more suggestions about things we can do at home in order to, I mean, you talked about things like downspout disconnection and having permeable surfaces, but is there anything else that you can think that we would be able to do?
I think I covered all the things that I thought would work. Like I mentioned all the things not to put down the storm sewer. And yeah, just increasing the amount of permeable surfaces on your property. Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add. That in itself is a lot of work. So
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty exhaustive.
if you've done it for yourself, you can start doing it for your neighbors.
I did check online though, as an ex-librarian, and that book's not available in Toronto Public Library. And as a person that spent a lot of time helping kids with their reports, I was really surprised. Are you going to be trying to get it into the public libraries?
Yes, so I have approached them. So what I've done is, because it's a self-published book.
Yeah, they're tricky about self-publishing.
But I did apply and send it to them, and they can't buy it directly from me. So I had to go through a library wholesaler. But now I'm with the library wholesaler, library bound. And so any librarian can now purchase it through library bound.
Okay.
And so I guess if you wanted it in your local library, you could maybe approach your librarian. I'm not sure how it works, but I think there's a way you can maybe request a book.
You can make you can request to have something purchased.
Okay. So yeah, as of a month ago, I'm now set up so that libraries can find my book.
Yes, Ellen?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, Mariko, a little bit about you embarked on this project to share, to let people understand better how they're connected to water and energy and so on. And you must have had certain ideas about how you were going to get the message across. And now you've talked a lot to school kids and you've talked to groups like ours. You've done courses. I'm wondering, have you, it's so important, this whole idea of explaining things or communication, I guess is what we're talking about. And have you learned new things, or have you been surprised at how your message got across, or are you thinking of different ways of reaching people because what you thought was going to work, it wasn't working? Any thoughts on communicating?
It's, yeah, I mean, it's kind of gone sort of how I thought, except it's one thing I thought was that I thought writing the book would be 90% of the work, and then 10% would just be getting it out there, but it's more like 50-50 or maybe even 40-60, because doing the work, like as a self-published book, I'm doing all my own promotion and getting the word out. So that was a big surprise. But once I talk to people, then it's been pretty good. Sometimes it's hard to kind of explain to people what the book is and that it's not just a kid's book. Adults can get it too, because people automatically think, oh, it's a kid's book, so it's not for me or whatever. So I've had that, and I think I've been able to reach a lot of age groups. just teenagers. I haven't really had teenagers rave about it, and I think it might be because they look at it and think, "Oh, that's for kids. I'm too old for that. I'm not really interested." But then university students that are into environment or urban stuff, they think it's cool. So, but yeah, I think maybe I have to work on, getting it to teenagers. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I don't have like one specific age group that I'm targeting. So I'm kind of all over the place in terms of trying to let people know. But it has been a hit with grandparents because grandparents think, oh, I can share this with my kid, especially if the grandfather worked in engineering or worked in infrastructure. Like this is kind of a chance for them to share kind of what they've done. So it's been a hit with those kind of people. And also, yeah, like I was surprised actually, it was very young kids. Like I wrote it so that an 8 or 10-year-old could read it on their own. So I thought that that might be the target group. But I've had parents of like toddlers that are 4 or even younger. Like one said he reads it to his toddler before nap time. And then the toddler goes in his crib and says Ashbridges Bay treatment plant over and over again and doesn't go to sleep. So I was like, wow, like someone in a crib is like, that's very young, like that's 2 or 3. So what I realized is that the experience of the parent reading it with the kid is what makes that really special, because the 2 or 3-year-old can't read it on their own, but they're reading it with their parent, and then it becomes this sharing between the parent and the child, and they ask questions, they talk about it, they learn together. And so so that was a big surprise. I didn't think 2 or 3 or 4-year-olds would be reading this book, but it's because they have the parent. And I was thinking how long time ago parents probably talked to their kids about this. Like, hey, this is where our water comes from. This is where we're putting our garbage. This is how we're going to generate our electricity. Like, and I think that long time ago in indigenous cultures, like this was something that was passed on from generation to generation. And like, hey, we have to take care of all these things because they take care of us. So I feel like that kind of communication between the generations has been a really good thing with this book, because it's something that adults and parents can read with their kids. And so that was a big surprise that I didn't really realize until it started happening. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Mariko, what do you think about the Unflood Ontario movement? Now, I don't know much about it, but Rita may be able to explain it. Or are you aware of it? And what do you think of it?
I saw something very briefly. I think Rain Gardens United might have put it on Instagram. I don't know much about it. So, but it sounds good. If someone wants to explain it, they can, maybe Rita, if you want to talk about it.
I know a little bit about it, and it's there's a whole bunch of organizations that have all come together and really have said, well, the take-home point is that with a lot more floods, we need the soil to be able to absorb rain, and so let's unpave, really. I mean, this is what it, let's value our ravines, let's value our parks, let's value our front gardens, our back gardens. Let's let the rain soak in, and everywhere the rain can soak in is going to help reduce floods. That's the message.
Yeah, it's great, because what we want to do is we want to kind of go back to how it used to be pre-development, where the water landed on the green permeable surfaces and it went into the ground. And so by doing that, that water gets clean as it goes through the soil, and then it actually enters the river from the bottom, and that's called base flow. And so I kind of talk about how now our stormwater is hot, fast, and dirty. But what we want to do is go back to how it used to be, which was not hot but cool, which is good for the fish. Slow, which is good for the river, and clean. So yeah, I think the Unflood initiative is excellent. Madeline has a question.
Yes. The lakeshore floods every time there is a reasonable amount of precipitation. This was not happening 15 years ago, but the city has one way or another paved most of the CNE grounds. And so all of the water from that huge acreage now flows overland and onto the lakeshore, and you have a foot of water or more on the lakeshore as a result. That's just one example of what we as a municipal organization are doing wrong, and we've got to do something about that. Everybody who hires a landscape architect, these are not landscape architects working on gardens. They pave everything with stone, and we've got to stop that. I guess that's it. In the Humber at Old Mill, they are upgrading the 2 pumping stations to more than treble their volume. That's taking place now. And then they're going to be dealing with stormwater as well.
Are these pumping stations pumping stormwater or
Sewage.
sewage? Right.
The stormwater is also being dealt with beginning about 6 weeks from now in the same area, because they've had basement flooding and they're changing the storm sewers. And all the storm sewers go into the Humber right there too. And they're cutting down, or they're removing some trees that I'm not happy about.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. Yeah, so whatever we can do to reduce the amount of stormwater leaving our properties, and then any, if we can do this all over the city, that would help. The city's also doing a lot of things with infrastructure to try and help as well. So we have to do things kind of at all levels.
It would be very nice if we could send copies of your book to some of the members of Toronto Council and the Premier of Ontario.
That would be great. I think, it's a simple book, but actually simple is good because, on my website, I have a list of all the people that the book is for, and I do include like decision makers, because sometimes decision makers, stormwater might not be their specialty or whatever, but it's good to just have a general basic understanding of all these things. So, yeah.
I was going to say that's just yet another reason for the TFN people to renew their membership, so we have money to be able to do that kind of thing. That would be wonderful. Has anybody got any more questions? Or I think there was one more question about solid waste, and they want to know whether it should be moved closer or incinerated, or can you kind of raise our awareness about the solid waste question?
Yeah, so garbage goes to London. It's really hard to find the landfill, and even this one is controversial. The First Nations that live very close to there don't want the landfill there. Could it be closer? yeah, it's really hard to find a landfill. So I think it's really difficult. Incineration, yeah, I mean, long time ago, incineration was very, like it caused a lot of air pollution and a lot of problems. They say that incineration now is a lot better, but I'm not an expert in that, so I can't really say. Blue bin, Eunice is asking, paper gets used, but what about plastics and glass? So that's a very good question. Yeah, paper goes to paper recycling. It's very hard to find the answers to these questions, but glass, through some research, I found out that all of Toronto's glass that we put in our blue bin goes to a company in Guelph, and then they crush the glass and they create like glass pellets. So that's what happens to Toronto's glass. Toronto's plastic, so we sell our plastic, or try to sell our plastic, and it's really hard because you have to find someone to buy it. And a year or two ago, China was a big buyer of some of our plastic, but China raised its standards, so they didn't want to have plastics that were highly contaminated. And so the City of Toronto had an initiative has an initiative for us to reduce our contamination in our recycling. But because of the change in the standards that China was accepting, they were buying our plastic, but I think they stopped buying some or all of it. So that caused a problem. And I can't figure out where our plastic goes right now. So sorry, I don't have the answer to that question.
Thank you.
And the compost from the green bins, that's going to, we have at least two processing facilities where our green bin stuff goes, and then it gets digested in methane digester. And yeah, I have more information on that, but I've sort of forgotten exactly the details. But if anyone has questions, they can contact me.
You see, this is one of the nuggets that you're talking about that we have to sort of go off and research,
Right.
get interested and start looking for the nuggets. Mariko, it was so good to have you today. Thank you so much. I found the idea of breaking down that wall between the city infrastructure and nature really, really compelling. And I'm hoping your book gets further on in the library system. Thank you again. Okay, I'm going to be talking about a few things to add to your calendar. You don't want to miss these lectures that are coming up. So please make sure to renew your membership with TFN by the end of June. We have a really nice lineup for the fall. We have The Secret Lives and Superpowers of Spiders by Dr. Catherine Scott, who was an arachnophobe, who became an arachnologist, a behavioral ecologist, specifically dealing with Black widows, who's going to be talking about the secret lives and superpowers of those neighbors of ours that live in our walls. On October 3rd, we have a really interesting lecture by Bridget Stutchbury called New Discoveries in Songbird Migration. Now, what I thought was so great about this was that she's written two books, The Bird Detective, Investigating the Secret Life of Birds, which sounds a titch raunchy, and another book, Silence of the Songbirds, How We Are Losing the World's Songbirds and What We Can Do to Save Them. Now, as I said, I was a librarian, so the whole idea that this book was a runner-up for the Governor General's Award 2007 really piqued my interest. So if you want to get some good summer reading in, that's probably one to do. In November, Bob Courtwright, who is our former president, we'll be talking on the Toronto Islands and their natural heritage. And that will be followed up on December 5th by Andrew Grease of the Bird Studies Canada, who will talk about the piping plover, which of course has its nesting habitat on the island. So it will remind us of the ecological role the islands are playing in our city. The last thing I want to mention is there's a new self-guided walk that's been added, and it's a bit of a challenge for you all. They call it the best 15-minute walk in the city, and I'm sure that many of you have wonderful 15-minute walks in the city that you could bring to the TFN. Theirs is in the area around the Throckmorton Mills Heritage Site. They say there are 400 odd identified species of wildflowers, shrub, and trees to enjoy, and a deep history stretching back to the earliest days of Toronto. And it might be the best 15-minute walk our city has to offer. So that's what's coming up in the fall, and that's what you can take advantage of now. And it was lovely to see you all, and hope to see you for our next lecture, which will be, I believe, in September, which is the spiders.